Welcome. Thanks, guys. Welcome once again. My name's Bill Matchett. I'm head of science at Quarry Fields High School, and I've been working a lot through LMC for a lot of these things here. And so the idea is today to try and give you a bit more of an understanding, because unfortunately, whether you know it or not, you are all guinea pigs. Basically, you're doing one of the two brand new syllabuses. In a lot of ways, the investigating science is probably the most interesting of all the new courses. But it also means that pretty much your teachers and you don't exactly have much of an idea of what's going to happen. Particularly, you're going to be doing, has anyone already done trials? Yeah, so this will help for HSC, and those of you who are doing trials early next term, this will hopefully help you there. The unfortunate thing, one of the things that your teachers, particularly those who have been working for a while, it's always, well, let's look at some past exam papers and see what's happening there. We don't have that for this course. And I've got a feeling they're going to ask you a whole heap of interesting questions. The session after lunch, we'll go over some of the practice questions and some questions that I've just made up to try and help you. Okay, so if my little clicker decides to work, or have I walked too far away from it? There we go. So what we're going to do, we're going to get started pretty soon on, so we're going to do modules 5 and 6 as one, and then modules 7 and 8 as one. Your teachers will tell you that the way the syllabus is designed, 5 and 6 kind of merge into each other, 7 and 8 merge into each other. Then so there'll be a 15-minute break there for morning tea, then we'll have lunch, and we'll come back and start talking about exams, which kind of is a bit dry, but it's what you need to have. So, what we're going to start off with is Module 5. We'll get back to that there. Kahoot 5.1. So, if you guys there, if you want to log into Kahoot, and what I'm going to give you in a second. Okay. So, what we got here is some questions. Let's do it that way. Let's go. So hopefully, okay, there is your code. 2, 3, 4. So, hopefully if I hit this, yep. Okay, if you can log into that. There's a problem, we don't have internet in here, or we don't have access to the Wi-Fi, so I've got to do this on mobile. Is there anyone who can't get on there? Or you can just go through the web thing. Okay, well, how about just go back. Don't worry. So I'm going to set it up as a game. I haven't used the mobile app before. This is not very well. Okay. I actually just most of the time just use web-based ones. So it's okay, let's go back to there. Okay, so we just want to play. There you go, that's better. Sorry, if you've already logged into that other one, let's just do it as classic. No, I don't want that. Okay, here we go. This looks a lot more promising. Okay, there's your PIN, 117207. Sorry for that. all your technology before you use it. You got to put your number in. Come on, state rank, get out of there. You got to use the number on your sheet of paper. On Riley, use your number. Oh, you're cheating. That's grouping. Is that you, Schwabe? Oh. Guys, no stupid names. Okay. There's still a few people trying to get on, still people scared. Okay. 1 second. Okay, Mufasa's dead, deal with it. Oh, spoilers, yeah, for a 20-year-old movie. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone? Okay, let's start. We have 11 questions to get started with. Okay, so we're starting right at the very start. For some reason we don't have sound, that's fine. Oh, there we go. Okay, good. Most of you worked out investigation. That's good. 1384, you're in front. Remember, it's the long game, not the short game. This is a very hard question. Okay, focus here. Yeah, here's a very interesting question. Oh, spelling bad. Who's 1926? Ah. Okay, is this the last one? Okay, 1926. It might come down to this last question, or last two. Okay. Oh, 1901, you can do this. Okay, let's see. Okay, who's 1901? 1877. Awesome, well done. Okay, so look, we are gonna just have a bit of fun with that through the day. Those are questions. Those are the questions that NESA have put out for you guys to practice on. Your teachers who are old enough to have been around when the last syllabus changed, and I'm one of them, don't get too enamoured with the NESA questions, because NESA produced sample exams 20 years ago, and the exam we got in that year was very different to what the exam was. Okay, but they're good practice, and one of the things that you get from that is the NESA questions, there's not a lot of actual hardcore content in there. One of the things you really need to focus on is the skills. And so hopefully today we can go through and we can get through some of that there, and I can't walk too far. Okay, so we're going to focus on going through each of the inquiry questions and having a look in depth there. Now, hopefully I had to do that question book a month ago, and I have made some changes there, so hopefully the questions are up as well there. But one of the things as well, this is a very interesting syllabus. It's not exactly like your physics, biochem, earth science and that there, which are very concept-based. Here's this point you need to know, here's this. One of the things with this course is there's a lot of callbacks. There are answers to things I'm going to put on the screen there that actually are the same as what you've got there. So in other words, when I'm talking about things, we'll talk about variables and that. Variables appear multiple times in the syllabus. So there's concepts that they keep coming back to. One here, peptic ulcers. Okay, I'm not going to give you the answers for this. I'm going to be a bit cruel for this one. What led to the discovery, and I probably should make it a little bit clearer, what led to the discovery that peptic ulcers were caused by bacteria? Anyone want to contribute? You can just yell it out. This is the first thing you probably did in the first part at the end of last year. Okay, well, who made the discovery? Marshall and Warren. Okay, so what data did they get? What started them on the journey? Yeah?
They collected bacteria in the stomach cells.
Yeah. So Robin Warren was he a gastroenterologist? Yeah. And so he was working at, I think it was Perth University, and he basically got tissue samples of people who had ulcers, and he looked under there and discovered that, well, just wait, there seems to be this bacteria in there. Barry Marshall was, I think his research student at the time, and he came in and did that. So what relationship did they find? What caused what? Bacteria caused peptic ulcers. And of course, that was a really interesting little thing. Come on. Because that actually led to a new discovery or new way of treating ulcers. Because prior to that, if you had an ulcer, it was because you drank too much, you smoked too much, you had too much spicy food, you basically did stupid things. And of course, Marshall Moran said, well, no. What was the treatment for peptic ulcers 30 years ago? Oh, you shouted out. What was the treatment? Similar to the treatment you have now if you get a bit of indigestion. Well, shout it out. I'm half deaf on this ear. Antibiotics is now the treatment. Antibiotics are the new technology. Previous to that, you had to basically take harsh antacids. So if you've ever had Mylanta you can usually get it in a powder form or pill form these days. In the old days, you had to have it as this weird milky emulsion. And for people who had ulcers, you had to actually use a really harsh version of that. Now, of course, what that also meant, well, their hypothesis was bacteria, the H. pylori bacteria, caused the production of stomach ulcers. And of course, how is it different? We just said that there. It was completely different. It completely went against the scientific thinking at the time. And of course, we do talk about this a little bit later when we talk about Barry Marshall being a little bit, I suppose you could say, reckless. Plant growth, who am I talking about here? Van Helmont, von Helmont. I think the syllabus has it as Van Helmont. 99% of the world has it as von. I don't know, Nessa know better than us. So what did he discover? Or what was his experiment then? What did he do? Do you remember what sort of tree? Willow tree. So he took a willow tree and he, for 5 years, did nothing but give it water. Okay? So he just wanted to do an experiment on how plants grew. And so from there, what data did he get? What did he collect? What did he measure? Half of you probably did this in your SRP in year 10 or whatever. Mass. I think he measured mass, wasn't it? It was the mass of the tree. And so what data? You got mass. Now, what relationship did he find? What was his XY relationship? What caused what? What did he feed to it? Water. And what did it do? It grew. Okay, so that's the simple thing you need from that there. New technology is not necessarily appropriate to this. He didn't really discover anything new. He didn't know about gaseous exchange at the time. So there was nothing really new come out of it, but that's fine. His hypothesis, which is probably linked to his relationship, that water is responsible for plant growth. And how is it different? Look, I don't think it's particularly different to what was done in the past. But Van Helmont, or von Helmont, I can never remember, is an important thing there because it's a stepping stone. 80 years later, I can't remember the guy's name, discovered stomates. Are any biologists in here? Yeah, do you know who's, I can't remember the guy's name. He discovered stomates and then they worked out that carbon dioxide was part of the process. Microwave ovens, who are we talking about here? Percy Spencer, okay. Now, what led to his discovery? His was a serendipitous discovery. What was that over here? Yeah, he was working on some microwave, or it was an accident. He was working on some microwave arrays and noticed he had something brown and sticky and warm in his pants. It was a chocolate bar, yes. And he noticed that he was working on these microwave radar installations and it melted his chocolate. At least that's what he told everyone in the lab. What data did he get? Is there really much data he got out of it, or? Yeah, it was basically just an observation of a relationship. And of course, then he, as we said, their relationship is microwaves cause things to melt or heat up. The new technology, what is the biggest technology we get out of this? Microwave ovens. There's one bigger, I suppose it depends on your point of view. For you people here, are you millennials still or are you another generation? You're Z? I thought we were beyond Z. Anyway, what technology in your life can you not live without? I just heard one pop up there, just saying. That's very, very, very good theatrics there. Mobile phones. Your mobile phone operates at about 10 centimetres, which is in the microwave region. Now, there has been concern in the past, oh my God, your phone uses microwaves, it causes cancer, it does this, it does that. There is no definitive proof on that yet. But microwave, so he was working on radars. So the radar has led to things like air traffic controls being able to be used. Sydney Airport can process hundreds of flights a day because some peanuts are sitting in a tower somewhere, and they're not even sitting in a tower anywhere. They're sitting in a bunker somewhere looking at all these radar images. Previously, you know the reason why Sydney Airport, most airports have a tower? Anyone? What's that?
Ground control.
Well, it is ground control, but you used to have, up until about 30 years ago, people were there with binoculars. If you drive past, like it's on the M5, you come out of the tunnel there, it's a big glass tower with glass windows on it. Before radar, people were there with binoculars saying, okay, this plane's coming in. You come in. You can't do that these days. The hypothesis is that microwave ovens can be used to cook food. How is it different? I actually don't think there's probably a really good thing there. It's basically just a different way of cooking food for most of us. It is a way, why are microwaves used in mobile phones as opposed to radio waves? You think of, what was that? What?
Microwaves are
They're harmless. Well, it's not so much the harmless, it's actually got to do with, they're smaller than radio waves, so they can actually have more information in them. And it's also in most countries as well. The EM spectrum has become a commodity. And so microwaves, I think, fitted in there. They weren't being used by anything at the time. And so that can be sold off. There's a thing there, everyone's got digital TV now, and I think that changed about 10 years ago. Prior to that, basically what they wanted to do is digital TV takes less bandwidth, so they could sell the other TV bandwidths as well. Okay, so that is 3, 4, I can't remember now, examples of scientific methodologies. Now, we're going to go back to those. This is one of those things here. Within this unit, there's a lot of callback to particularly Marshall and Warren. And I think I could almost guarantee there's going to be a question this year on Marshall and Warren because I think it's cool and everyone thinks it's cool out there. So, we're going to look here. Peptic ulcers. Objectives and data. So this is stuff straight out of the syllabus, methodology, peer review. Sorry, I'll go back to that there. What was the objective of the Marshall and of what they were doing? What were they trying to achieve? Shout it out loud, I can't hear you. Cure peptic ulcers or find an alternative treatment. What data did they collect? I'm going to start with what was that over here? Someone over here was, yes? So, and what were they collecting off the patients? Biopsy. So a biopsy, if you don't know, is they basically go into your body and they collect some samples. And so I think with peptic ulcers, it probably would have been stick a tube down your throat, scrape your stomach and get the cells out. For other things there, if you know someone who's had cancer treatment, they often do some keyhole surgery, grab a bit of the tissue out, and then try and use that to, they then use tissue culture to grow the cells. And when Marshall and Warren did that, they noticed the H. pylori in there. Their methodology, what are the two main types of methodology? Primary and secondary. So Marshall and Warren was essentially primary, yeah. Most of what they did was primary. Now, the peer review thing here is an interesting thing. What's the purpose of peer review? It does come up later in modules 7 and 8, I think, a lot. What's the purpose of it? Why do you peer review? Or what is peer review? What's the word peer mean? You're all under a lot of peer pressure now because you don't want to talk. So peer means you guys. So review means that a scientist will present usually in a research paper, and they will present that. Was she trying to give an answer? No. Okay. So Marshall and Warren is an interesting one because it took about 10 years for their peers to accept their results. Initially, all the people working in gastroenterology said, you guys are nuts. This is completely wrong. Bacteria cannot grow in acidic environments. It cannot do this, cannot do that. Of course, since then, we now know that there is a whole range of bacteria that do a whole heap of weird stuff. There's a branch of bacterium, and I think even algae and things called extremophiles. Okay, a lot of you would have watched in the last month the TV show Chernobyl. You know, we talk about Chernobyl a little bit later on, but they sent in a robot about 10 years ago, and they found that on the nuclear fuel rods, which if you went near it, you're dead, there is, I think it's algae, and some biology teachers can probably correct me. Is it algae? Anyone? No? There is actually algae growing on the nuclear fuel rods. And you think, well, just wait, that's ridiculous. Doesn't radiation kill? These bacteria, and this is one of the things people want to research them, is they obviously have some genetic thing inside them that stops them dying. And so I think cancer researchers really want to examine these things to see how they stop dying. There's also, any earth science people in here? No? They've discovered bacteria living 40 kilometres down that reproduce once every 300 years. Bacteria, life lives in really extreme things. Now, those bacteria that live in extreme environments, astronomers are very interested in those. Why? Why might astronomers be interested in bacteria that lives in weird conditions?
Because they want to know the condition and the stuff that make them resist to that condition.
Yeah.
For when they want to go to Mars and
Going to Mars, So one thing is, going to Mars. If you've seen not Ben Affleck, his boyfriend, Matt Damon in The Martian, okay? One of the things there, he had issues with bacteria and that as well. And so if you can get organisms, and particularly something like a blue-green algae or something like that that can photosynthesize, that could be a way of producing oxygen. The other thing as well is particularly, I think it's around the moons of Jupiter. I think, is it Io? There's one of the moons of Jupiter that actually has a liquid ocean underneath it. And so if there's things that can live in radiation, things that can live in extreme temperatures, they might be living on other planets. If you really want to get something interesting in the future, get into a field called exobiology, which is the biology essentially of aliens. And just don't storm Area 51. You're just going to get shot. Eratosthenes, and if there's any Greek people here, correct me on my pronunciation. Oh no, I'm not even going to do it now. What did he do? Circumference of the Earth. And, no, someone at the back, I got that. He lived in ancient Egypt. And so this is one of the things here, I think everyone has seen, the Flat Earth Society. Apparently they've got thousands of members across the globe. Oh no, has anyone not seen that meme? But his objective was the ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians. We say, we're so smart in the 21st century. They knew a lot of crap back then. And they knew that the Earth was probably a sphere. And so he used, what did he do? Yeah?
Waited for the solstice and then put two poles into Triune and Alexandria and met these shadows from those.
Yeah. So he knew at a certain time that the sun would be in a certain position. And so in one place, Cairo and Alexandria, yeah. So two cities there. He measured the angle at noon at one place and found that it had 0. At the exact same time in another place, he said, there's an angle of 10 degrees. I can't remember exactly the angle. They had two measurements at the same time. He used a bit of trigonometry and he worked out that the circumference of the Earth had to be, I think is it 30,000 kilometres? 40,000. But in that time, he had it within, I think it was about 1 or 2% of the accurate number there. So, what do I want to do? Methodology. We've established there's primary and secondary. What was his? Primary and secondary. Well done. He measured his own data. He basically measured at one of the angles, probably he had a man-servant off measuring the other one. And he used secondary data because the two cities were one of the biggest trade routes at the time. So they very accurately knew the distance between the cities. So in that case there, and this is a good example, and this is probably why they've thrown this into the syllabus, it's primary, it's secondary. And that's a really good example because it shows that most science is not just primary, it's not just secondary. It's a mixture. Peer review, you could probably say there probably wasn't much peer review at the time. Like a lot of things, he basically said, I'm smart, I found this, accept it. And people did. And he was smart, and it probably was good to accept it because he was very close to it. Doppler. Any physicists here? Physicists, good. What's Doppler? Okay, so the Doppler effect, the easiest way to explain it is basically the race car effect. You're standing there, and you go, "Meow." So what you've got there, Doppler effect. I don't. You want to do that sound effect? No. The Doppler effect is that we know it basically as sound waves. So the easiest way to explain it is sound waves. So you hear an ambulance, you hear a race car. Some of you in your fully sick RXs going past you. As the car comes towards you, the pitch of the sound goes up. As it goes away, it goes down. Now, the physicists who are studying astronomy will also know that it's got to do, any wave experiences the Doppler effect. It's how we understand things including the Big Bang and stuff like that, because light actually gets Dopplered as well. What did Doppler actually work in? What area of science did he work in? It starts with an A. Astronomy. Doppler was actually an astronomer. And so what he was doing, he was looking at distant objects, and he actually worked out that the waves changed. And he was able to see that there was, I think it was redshift in that there. His methodology was basically first-hand investigation. Now, one of the things there, we're at the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. Professor Brian Cox is out here. He seems to be out here every 3 weeks at the moment. But he's doing stuff there. And one of the things there, if you look at modern astronomy, if you're going to be an astronomer these days, what do you do? Well, what's probably the closest astronomical observatory to where we are now? It's actually about a kilometre that way. There's up on the hill here, there's actually a little observatory. Problem is now, when I first started working out here a very long time ago, that area over there had no lights. That's a visual astronomy thing there. We now work in the area of radio astronomy and a whole heap of weird things there. So what we've got with this here is Doppler worked at a time where he had to sit there, and I think he used glass plates, and teachers can correct me if I'm wrong. He used glass plates as a photographic medium, and he looked at the stars. Astronomy used to be laborious work. You would sit there for hours, days on end, and compare these things. So from that point of view, what he did was quite well. Peer review, it was pretty much well accepted. Okay, there wasn't much controversy with that. Priestley, what did Priestley do? Oxygen, thank you. So his objectives and data was that he was trying to actually, any chemists here? Yes, good. He basically used, was it red mercury? Does anyone know? Red mercury to have a reaction and produce oxygen. Now, of course, Priestley is an interesting one. His objectives was to show that oxygen, I think, and you've got to correct me here, that oxygen had a part in the biological process and that it was involved in plants and things like that. His methodology, what was his methodology? What did he do? Come on. He did a first-hand investigation, a very interesting first-hand investigation, You probably couldn't do this at school. That's fine. You probably couldn't do this investigation at school because what essentially did he do? Animal testing. He thought, and he basically took a plant, a mouse, and put them in a glass jar. He then also said, well, the mouse seems very happy, but if I take the plant out, the mouse isn't so happy, the mouse is dead. He then said, well, let's put the plant back in there and let's leave it overnight, and of course then the mouse is dead. There's a lot of dead mice in Priestley's history here. And so it was a first-hand investigation, but you would also have an issue there, and you can talk about this later on, particularly in Module 7 and Module 8, the ethics of the whole thing there. We these days say, well, it's bad to kill animals, and we'll talk about that a bit later on. Peer review, I don't think there would have been much peer review. He discovered oxygen. It's like, hooray. Okay. Now, IQ 3. IQ 3 is, well, it's not really an IQ, I've just IQ there. What you were supposed to do in this third part of the syllabus is you just do your own investigation. Now, most of you, I know my guys did a bit of a practice step study on this here. Design your own investigation, do it. I've got a feeling that one of your extended response questions at the end of the year will be describe in detail an investigation you've done in class and assess how you've done the variables and you made it reliable and valid. I've got a practice question for you later on that anyway, but just keep that in the back of your head. Okay, integrity. What does the word integrity mean? Anyone? Integrity? No? What's that?
Honesty.
Honesty, yeah. You're being truthful. So, the idea is that when you do research, that people will believe it because you've got integrity. And of course, we talk a little bit later on, that's not always the case. So, we need to know a few terms. And this is leading on from what I was just saying. What's your independent variable? Okay. Variable has changed to see what effect it has. And of course, the definition leads, of course, into the dependent variable, which is what is changing. The terms dependent and independent variable, those of you who are doing other sciences as well as IS, I think they're going to ask, they're really pushing this scientific methodology in all the courses. So having a knowledge of this will help you in the other stuff as well. So of course your independent is what you are deliberately changing. Your dependent is what you are measuring. So in any good investigation, or in most of the investigations you're going to do, you're going to have one independent and you're going to have one dependent. Now there are multiple examples where you have more, but not at the level we need to worry about here. Okay. You also have control variable. What's your control variable? Keep the same. I probably should, though, have an S on the end. Control variables. Essentially, it's everything else. You try and keep everything else the same. Now, two things that also appear here, and they're going to appear later on as well, is this idea of sampling. So, when you are doing this, and anyone doing geography? Yes, I know you are. Anyone else doing geography? Anyone doing, is it society and culture? Yeah, so in those courses there, you probably do a lot of, society and culture in particular, you've done a lot of surveys and things like that. Yeah, so when you're doing a survey, when you are sampling something, is what you're doing true representation? Okay, does it represent exactly what you're trying to do that there? And I'll give you some examples later on in Module 7, which will sort of drive this home a little bit. And of course, we've got, probably in here, it's probably about 120 people in here at the moment. You know, if I wanted to say, how good was my lecture? And I just sampled Preetha up the back there because she's my student, she'll probably tell me, oh, you're awesome. But is that a true sample? of that there. Because I know she's trying to suck up to me because I've got her for 2 subjects and she wants good marks at the end of the year. Okay? So that's not a true good sample. If I wanted to say, well, how good was this today? I'd probably sample about 20 to 30 people, which is about 20 to 30%. And that there. Does anyone know what the biggest survey in Australia is? Oh, good. I was going to make a joke about the Logies or something like that. Teen Choice Awards or something stupid. But yeah, the census in Australia, and I think last census they had something like 98% of the population answered the questions. That was after they fixed up their online problem that allegedly got hacked but didn't get hacked. Okay, now of course the problem is their sample size. When you're doing a scientific investigation, can you sample everything? It depends what you're doing. Think about it here. If we were going to do a really simple motion prac, not even physics, say year 9 or year 9 or 10, you're doing some motion stuff. And you always do that thing where you measure out 100 metres and you run. Get someone to run and you can graph their motion. Do you take a sample every metre? Do you measure their running every centimetre? You could, I suppose, but it would take a lot of effort. Generally, when I do the experiment, I say every 10 metres you take a measurement at a time, and then you can get a reasonable graph. So you've got a thing there, sample size. You want enough data so that you can get a representation, but you don't want too much data. My class can tell you we did a prac last year, or an investigation, secondary investigation last year, where we looked at nearly 200 or over 200 years of Bureau meteorology data. It actually broke Excel in the computer because there was something like 40,000 bits of data, which gave us a really good spread, but it was probably too much. And when I do it again, I'll do it as monthly instead of daily averages. Now, ethics. This is the thing I'm pretty sure they will ask you a question this year about, because it's kind of a new concept in the course. Ethics has always been there, it's always been there in the skills, but it's really, and particularly in investigating science, ethics is a huge thing in Module 7. Confidentiality, what does that mean? What's that? Yeah, well, I'm looking at you. Oh, sorry, was there someone, was it behind you? Giving names. So and we're in the School of Medicine here. So School of Medicine is about trying to help people and solve it there. So if we were going to go around and say, well, we want to work out how many people in Campbelltown have syphilis. You're not going to, well, I don't know. I'm not going to besmirch, while we're being filmed, I'm not going to make jokes about people in particular. But like in medicine, if you want to say, so syphilis is probably an embarrassing condition to have, you got to go to the clinic, they've got to give you some penicillin, and then you got to blah, 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 blah. But you wouldn't go out and say, go do a survey in the street. Do you have syphilis? What's your name? Give blah, 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 blah. You need to be confidential about things. And there's a lot of things in science that are confidential. Basically just to protect people, because particularly in medicine, you want to help people. But people in general are pretty stupid, and even if someone wants to help you, you don't want it on the front page of the paper saying, so-and-so has syphilis, can we do a GoFundMe to get penicillin? And we'll try not to make Israel Folau jokes about that. Not about syphilis, GoFundMe. So confidentiality is that data is private, okay? And that way, and the good thing, the reason you need confidentiality is, we made a couple of jokes about sexually transmitted diseases there. People will not give you their true information if they think people are going to know about it. So confidentiality is important so that you get true data. And of course, that is a really important thing in the information day and age, because there have been data breaches. And next thing you know, everyone knows about your conditions and things like that, which people are pretty embarrassed about sometimes. Humane treatment. What's it mean to be humane? Sorry, I forgot this generation doesn't understand this with social media. Humane means, you treat someone with dignity and respect. Okay, that's why I'm trying hard not to make too many bad jokes. Okay, so you don't, if someone's going to be part of a study, so there's a lot of things there where people are parts of studies. You know, I was part of a study a few years ago about sleep apnea and things like that. And so what happened there, they're not going to prod me with all sorts of things there. They're going to treat me reasonably well. The other thing there, and this is the one that probably evokes a bigger response than humane treatment, is animal welfare. Now, animal welfare, you know, don't be bad to animals. Now, of course, one of the things there, your teachers may know this. Sorry, we'll do that there. Animals are not treated cruelly. According to the Department of Education, an animal is only an animal if it's got a backbone. Invertebrates you can do anything to. But, you know, we tend not to. But animals have to be treated humanely. So this is where, if you relate it back to Priestley, Joseph Priestley, and I've got to be careful, I always end up saying Jason Priestley, which for some of you will be a joke, but some of you won't be. So Joseph Priestley, did he treat the animals humanely or ethically? Not really. You say, look, he's killing a hell of a lot of mice. He's probably gone through hundreds, if not thousands of mice, and they're dead. Can anyone think of another example where animal treatment is important in science? Animal testing. Who was that? Hi. Animal testing. 30 years ago, if you wanted to bring makeup to market, you tested it on animals. You can't do that anymore. You can't just do, yes, you had all these rabbits which had lipstick and eyeliner and rouge and stuff like that on there. Yeah, it's kind of is as stupid as it sounds, because it's like, oh, that eyeliner actually burns the eyes. We might not send that to market. The stupid thing about that as well, like we say, oh, we're all really humane in that. I think it was a couple of years ago, The Body Shop wanted to sell all their stuff to China, but they couldn't sell to China because China actually requires that makeup and body products are actually tested on animals. So it's a double-edged sword with a lot of these things, but I think in the end it was like, well, let's just be nice instead of just doing stuff to get into China. Primary investigation. So we talked a bit about that. Plan, collect, record, analyse. Oh, let's go back there. So, how do you plan a primary investigation? What's that? Research. You do a bit of research. So in investigation, often what you do is you do a bit of background research to try and work out what people already know. And if people know stuff, then you can say, well, they've done this, I'm going to move on. And that's how, in theory, science works. You find out what people already know, and you try and find something new from that. When you collect, is that someone knocking on the door? Wasn't expecting that to happen.
Okay, so
Go up the stairs.
the HC.
Yeah, upstairs. Sorry, they'll be in a second. Wait. Then you collect your data. Now, of course, collect your data, you have to plan your experiment. Because in a lot of places, if you're working, what's the world's biggest experiment? Physicists? World's biggest experiment. Cost billions upon billions of dollars, still going. Large Hadron Collider. Large Hadron Collider took about 20 to 30 years of planning. It took billions of dollars. Then they had protesters saying, well, no, you can't turn it on because it is going to cause the end of the world, because it's going to cause black holes. Other people saying, well, maybe it's going to create particles that travel back in time, so we need to collect data before we even put the switch on. Then you record your data, and of course, data collection in this day and age, for most science, is throw it in the computer and hope for the best. And of course, the scientist's job now is mainly to do this little bit here, which is the analysis, analyse what's going on. Now, of course, when we go to the next bit here, secondary investigations, you do exactly the same thing. On a meta level, you basically do the same thing. You plan, you go look at your background research. Your collection generally isn't going out and doing the experiment yourself, because it's secondary, of course. It is actually taking all the data and putting it into formats that are similar. There might be a few of you, I know there's 2 of you in here at least that are doing extension science as well, which is a lot of that data analysis. Then you record, and recording you're essentially, in this case here, you're just putting your data into a new form, and then of course you end up analysing it. In the end, both types of investigations are essentially just looking at the data and trying to explain it. Okay, validity. We're going to do some big words again. What is a valid experiment? What's a valid experiment? What?
An investigation that gives your answer and give the answer of your aim.
Awesome. So a valid experiment, it measures what you try to do. So it measures your aim, it measures your hypothesis. So if your hypothesis is putting rabbits in glass jars is going to cause them to die, and your final experiment says oxygen is awesome, it's not actually necessarily a valid experiment. Next one, reliability. What's reliable? What's a reliable experiment? You stretched. What's a reliable one? No? You stretched a little bit. I thought you were putting your hand up. Yep. Awesome. So it's repeated. It's repeatable. And this is one of the things that we'll get to, particularly in Module 7, is that if you can't repeat your results, it's not really that good an experiment. Consistency is a word they threw in there. And look, consistency, they're reliable as well. Okay, so they're kind of all the same thing. Okay, here is one here. There's a little bit one here. Sources of error. What does it mean by a random error? What's a random error? I don't say it's an error that's random. Yeah? Yeah, it's just, a random error is just something, when you're measuring your results, you get changes. You can't control it, okay? Can't be controlled within the investigation. So this is the thing, whenever you do a measurement, it's like, oh, it's up here, blah, 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 blah. That's just what it is. This is the one we're going to really worry about, systematic errors. What's a systematic error? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so random errors are just little fluctuations in the data. Systematic errors are essentially things that are a problem with either your equipment or your design. So one of the things there is, those of you when you've done physics in junior school, and you do the thing, you get out the Newton balances, and you put a 50 gram mass on there, and it measures 150 grams each time. That means that your equipment is wrong. Okay? Or that what you're doing is wrong. It can also mean that your experiment design is flawed. Okay, so there's a whole range of potential systematic errors. Okay, IQ 5. Now this one here is getting a little bit into the more technical stuff. What's the purpose of the scientific report? Why does the scientific report exist? We kind of touched on it a minute or two ago. What was that? Peer review, yeah. So one of the things there is if you want to show other scientists what you've done, they've got to be able to follow your results. They've got to be able to follow what you've done. So what we've got here, measures taken to reduce error. Okay, so how do you reduce the error? Controlling, very good. Controlling your experiment. What as well might you do with your equipment before you do your investigation? Oh, who was that over here? Awesome, calibrate. Ensure all of your data or all your machines are measuring what they do there. For those of you who've done a bit of chemistry, you do a lot of calibration. Physicists often do that as well. Ensure that when you've got nothing in there, your thing is measuring zero. Language style use. This is a bit of a harder one. This is where we're merging into a bit of literacy. What should your style of report in language be? Scientific language, yeah. You don't do, and I do this in class myself, you don't say, put the big glassy thingy on the stand thingy and then put the Bernie thingy underneath. Third person, past tense. And what's the other one I'm missing here? What's it? Third person, past. Essentially what you do, passive voice. There's the one there. It's a lot of literacy stuff here. I know you weren't expecting that. So you don't say, and this is probably a fault of ours, this, my school's changing this at the moment. We often say a lot of things like we give you in junior school recipe experiments. Put this on this, do this on that. Your report should be, give me a quick experiment. What? Boiling water, yeah, thank you, Shwaib. Boiling water. The beaker was filled with 100 mils of water and placed on top of the tripod and gauze. The Bunsen was turned on and placed on the blue flame. Passive voice means you don't say, I did this. Oh, any literacy people here can help me with that. But essentially, you don't put yourself in there. And you say, we did this. No, you don't say we did this. Say, this was done. And look, in all honesty, in the HSC, you won't get marked down for it, but it is a skill we're trying to instill in you. And the presentation structure of the report is very thing there. You've got an introduction, you've got an abstract. You've then got a methodology, you've then got your, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head there, but it's very stylised. Now, let's have another go. Let's see what we can get out of this. Oh, you're very quick on this one. Hopefully I made this one easy enough for you. Oh, my spelling is shocking in these Kahoots. Okay, what do we got there? Who's 1877? Ah, going well. I'm going to berate myself. My spelling in some of these is shocking. Okay, it's getting tense now in the leaderboard. Okay, let's have a look. 1527. Where's 1527? Well done. Okay. Now, guys, that last one there, peer review, when we get to module 7 a little bit later, that is a really huge issue in science, as a lot of you probably are already aware. We're going to go through to module 6 now. Oh, that's a bit weird. That should say technologies, hopefully okay, we may have a little bit of a problem with some of the fonts on here for some reason, but let's while you're fresh on that, Kahoot, let's do another one. I know, I'm messing with your heads. this is only a short. Okay, we're just going to get started. There's only 4 questions here anyway. (1926 and 1878). Now, one of the interesting things about that there is some multiple choice questions for Module 6, and NESA provided really not as many there. So I don't know, take that as you will, whether there is going to be, there has to be about 25 marks from each thing there, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, here we go.